Michelle, are you ready?
I was born ready.
She's an award-winning author, speaker, and podcast host who serves on the National Faith Advisory Council. She supported Donald J. Trump for president before it was cool. From her she shed in her beautiful backyard, this is the Michelle Moore Show.
Feeling like I'm breathing my last breath. Feeling like I'm walking my last steps. Look at all of these tears I've wept. Look at all the promises that I've kept. I put my all into your hands, and it's all to keep. I let you in with all that I can. You're not hard to reach, and you bless me with the best gift that I've ever known. You give me purpose every day. You give me purpose in every way. Thinking my journey's come to an end. Sending out a farewell to my friends. For inner peace, ask you to forgive me for my sins. Oh, would you please? I'm more than grateful for the time we've spent. My spirit's at ease. I put my all into your hands. Learn the lessons you teach. No matter when, wherever I am. You're not hard to reach, and you bless me with the best gift that I've ever known. You give me purpose. Yeah, you given me purpose in every way. Oh, you are my everything. Oh, you are my everything. Don't do the voiceover. Do it. Play music. God is in this room right now. I want you to put your hands up. God is here right now. He's in the midst of our pain and our struggle right now. I want you to put your hands up. You are not alone. Do you hear me? You are not alone. You are not alone. You are not alone. You are not alone.
Hi, everybody. So glad that you're with us today. Well, okay. Got a lot going on, got a lot planned for today. So we're going to go on ahead and get started. That was, yes, Justin Bieber. That video is about 3 years old. And I was listening to it back when it first got released, and I just enjoyed it, heard it numerous times. I like the song. Okay, tomorrow, just want to give you a heads up. So tomorrow we're going to have Tara Reid here. She's a staffer that was sexually harassed by Joe Biden. And so she's going to be here. Man, she's in Russia. She's out of the country just because that way for her safety. And so we're going to have quite the conversation with her. I'm really excited about that. Also tonight, mark your calendar, spend some time with us tonight. Allie Carter, she's come out with a new video. And so many people aren't necessarily going to be able to see it unless maybe they see it through our network. And so we're going to be airing that everywhere. So on the Michelle Moore Show Rumble channel, Truth Talk America Rumble channel, truthtalkamerica.com, and the network for Truth Talk America. So we'll be running that tonight at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time and then 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So mark your calendar. It's only going to be about a 30-minute presentation. She speaks for about 25 minutes. We'll start streaming it right on time at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern for you. And so if you're not familiar with her tonight, you're going to get quite the earful. But she relates to the Diddy stuff, and it gets way bigger and with her as well. Excuse me. So just heads up. And so she's come out with a brand new video, and we're supporting her. And so we're going to make sure that as many people see what she had to say last night as possible. So I've asked producer Ron to put in some extra time tonight, and he has agreed. And so we're going to make sure that you get to see that. If you haven't seen it already or don't have a way to see it, we're going to make sure you have a way to see it and share it with those that you want to share it with as well. Okay. We did Flashaganza a few weeks ago. Well, we're still getting photos, and look at what we got. Little Winston, he's sitting there with his winnings. Is Winston adorable or what? Like, too cute. I mean, just too cute. I love it. So Winston is apparently enjoying his tennis balls that he got. I love it, love it, love it. Thank you so much. I am so blessed by seeing these little fur babies enjoying the gifts that they received. It just really blesses me. Obviously, I like to share it as well. It's just so good. It's just so good. We're going to be doing it again next year. I can already see the writing on the wall for Flashaganza when he turns 7. So that's so good. All right. Well, let's go on ahead and get started. So I had said yesterday, well, before I do that, also, I want to remind you about yesterday's show. We had Othello and his son Yeshua. So they were on the show. Horrific story, horrific testimony. They're walking out. And so I had said, they mentioned they had some documents. They sent those documents to me, and I have them up on michellemooreshow.com. It is going to be the second rectangularly shaped button on that website, because the first button is what we're going to be covering today, so that you can hear everything and read everything if you want to on what we're going to be going over today. So we have a whistleblower coming on Friday. I think it's important that you have some foundational information, and so about who John McGreevy is. And so we're going to be talking about Linwood and John McGreevy today. And so we're going to do that today. We're going to have Tara Reid tomorrow, and then we're going to have the new whistleblower on Friday. Okay, so today is going to be about Linwood and John McGreevy. So, but I do want you to know that Othello's documents with Yeshua are on michellemooreshow.com. When you click on that button, it'll take you to a folder that gives you both documents. He sent me 2, so they're there for you. I did want to follow up on that as well for you. Okay. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is, and that's michellemooreshow.com. Okay. Not the Michelle, it's Michelle, 3 words, michellemooreshow.com. All right. And that's where you can always get all of our resources and stuff on there. All right. Well, we're going to go on ahead and get started. So Linwood. So I remember when Linwood had a meeting in the Oval Office with President Donald Trump. And as soon as I saw this photo, see how big President Donald Trump is smiling? I don't know, just something struck me. And I said, there is something going on here. Something. I don't know what it is, but there's something going on here. And so ever since then, I have paid attention to Linwood. Now, Linwood got kicked off of X, or Twitter at the time it was called. And so I have followed him on Telegram. So for those of you that don't know, he is still around and he is very active on Telegram. And I follow him and read and see what he's saying. He quotes a lot of scripture. I love that. He does a lot of that kind of stuff. And then also he does his dog comms, which, he'll show you somebody and he'll talk about different things with secret societies and all that. There's a lot of information. I personally absolutely believe Lynn Wood. And if memory serves me right, I think even the first week that we started the Michelle Moore show, I think I did a show on reasons why I trusted Lynn Wood and believed him to be absolutely a good guy. Now, he's gotten a lot of stuff that he's talked about. He represented the John Benet Ramsey parents and the brother. He represented the bomber, Richard Jewell. You find out a lot of things about him and those relationships and experiences when you follow him. And I personally just believe that, first of all, no matter what he did in his early years, I do believe that Lynn Wood, I have no idea if he's always been good. I think maybe he has, but I don't really see any signs, where none of us are perfect. And so, but he was representing Richard Jewell back decades ago. And I think there's so much more to the John Benet Ramsey case, even than what we probably even know at this point. Richard Jewell was certainly set up, from what we know. And he's got some other cases that he's talked about. And so it's very insightful, when you get to looking and reading about what he has to say. I still believe Lynn Wood. It's just me. So, I've had some people say, well, I don't really trust him. I don't like him. I don't whatever. I do. And so today I'm sharing about that, and I'm going to lay out a few things. So the first thing is about Lynn Wood is I got to thinking yesterday about today's show, and I got to thinking about how very few people ever talk about Lynn Wood. And I wondered why. And so I think that in itself is a sign that something big, is going on where he is concerned. And again, I go back to this photo. That's why I'm showing you this photo. I have always thought there is something to this photo. And yes, Lynn Wood is smiling, but Donald Trump, he's really smiling. And I think that's a calm. That's just me. I do think this is a calm. And so showing to you, yep, excited. This is a good day, And so, and the other thing is that I've noticed about Lynn Wood, a few things. The first thing is that he is a Donald Trump supporter, and he says great things about Donald Trump. I think there's a lot of great insight from him. And then the other thing is he's always talking consistently about fixing 2020. How are we ever going to move forward even with our election coming up when we know good and well, and this is why we have to be talking about some of this, because Friday's whistleblower, you're going to get some stuff that is going to be connecting to what we're talking about today. So it's very important that you listen. And so how are we ever going to fix what's going on? And what if the election, corruption and all of that is much bigger than what we even know? What if it's even much bigger? And so how could it be much bigger? Well, what if external forces were at work, meaning other countries were at work? And so we're going to be talking about some of these details and on Friday, and some proofs and different explanations. So it's very important that everybody understands that, these are important topics, of course, and then how these men really kind of play into it. So you've probably heard of me, some of you are new to the show. I have talked about John McGreevy a few times. I absolutely was a big fan of John McGreevy's, and I believe he was telling us the truth. So for those of you that are new, we've gotten a lot of new subscribers, especially in the last few months. Many of you have written to me saying, hey, I've been watching your show for the last 2 months. I love it, blah, blah, blah. And so, can you help me get ivermectin? So, but it's, which that's a whole nother thing. We've gotten over 1,000 prescriptions now that we've helped people get ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and more. And so we just want to say, we hope that it's just so good that we're able to help people. So anyways, and so John McGreevy, I believe, was a hero. I believe John McGreevy was trying to tell us the truth about many things and trying to wake us up to some hard truths that many people have been fooled about. Probably still many are still fooled about, and so we'll see. So part of what I'm trying to do is bring you people that have firsthand information and knowledge. And so John McGreevy is somebody that kind of intertwines in some ways with Friday's guest. And so we want to make sure that you have also some foundational information. And so Lynn Wood, when you hear the Lynn Wood whistleblower, it's not somebody that was whistleblowing on Lynn Wood. It was somebody who Lynn Wood brought forward. Okay. So again, we know people by their fruit. And so what was Lynn Wood talking about? And what was this whistleblower talking about? And so I think these are very important things for us to consider when we think about who we can trust and who we cannot trust. And so if you were to ask me on a scale of 1 to 10, do you trust Lynn Wood? And where, if so, where on the scale? I would say yes, and I'd be at a 9. I mean, I really don't know that I could tell you I trust anybody at a 10, but I would say that Lynn Wood is one of the ones that are in that category that I trust the most. And so, it's just unfortunate. You always have some doubt. You're always questioning and checking and double checking. And I like to confirm but verify, or trust but verify. I mean, and so, but I've just seen no red flags with Lynn Wood. Now, he brought forth John McGreevy, and this was actually on January the 9th, 2021, that this was all recorded. We have some recordings for you. We've got 7 videos in total, and they're on michellemooreshow.com as well. But we're going to also talk about the transcript from John McGreevy being interviewed at some table. We don't know whose breakfast nook table it looks like, but, John McGreevy at first comes forward as Sean, or maybe it was Ryan D. White, or Sean D. White, I don't remember. And so I don't know why I'm thinking it might be, it was Ryan. And so, and then we end up finding out later on that no, his name was really John McGreevy. And so we're going to go over some things with you, some basic things. We're going to show you a video as well, a couple of videos today. And so the first thing I want to go over with you is in the interview, it starts out and it says, this is an interview with Ryan Dark White. So Dark, D-A-R-K. And so he says, this is an interview. So this is the interviewer saying this. This is an interview for attorney Lynn Wood. Lynn Wood's bringing you this information. So I read some things over the weekend that had to do with all the vetting process that John McGreevy went through, how hard it was for him to even get to Lynn Wood and to get this far to even sit down at a table. So there's a lot of vetting process that went through to get to this point where you're going to see a video and you're going to see him sitting at the table kind of blurred out. But and all of this right here that we have as well today with the transcript. And it says, and Ryan, if you could just give us a brief background, excuse us. And so it goes on and it says, so he says, Ryan, he says, the interviewee says, Ryan D. White, it's not my birth name. So this is John McGreevy. He says, it's not the name I prefer. Originally from Maryland, I hold a graduate degrees. He says, I held graduate degrees. I'll explain that in physics. This is very important for everybody to understand. It's so interesting too, because I saw all of this and listened to all of this when it first came out back in 2021. It's interesting because when you know more and you go back through this, what I'm experiencing is understanding this at a whole nother level. Plus also with having had the conversations I've had with Friday's guest, you end up dealing with some people that you're going to get to see him and you're going to realize these people are like, they're really very, very highly intelligent people. And so, I mean, to hold graduate degrees, plural, in physics, mathematics, biology, and chemistry from the University of Pennsylvania and Green College, Oxford. Graduate college would be of University of Florida and Johns Hopkins and University of Maryland's physics program. And that's the way it reads. He says throughout this control that Rod has put on, he goes on to say that Rod Rosenstein, he alleges, would send letters to his schools. He says, my graduate school, my undergraduate, he said he'd send letters to the military saying that, this person, Ryan White, is using John McGreevy's information. John McGreevy's deceased, so best if you just destroy it. So what he's saying is that Rod Rosenstein was trying to destroy any records that had to do with him. He says he got much of it destroyed. There are still pieces there that can easily be verified and checked and rebuilt, hopefully. He says, but he did his best to destroy it. He did the same thing with the military, the U.S. Army from 1985 to 1996, and Maryland Guard for 3 years after that, 3.5 years after that. Rod apparently didn't know that the Guard So he's talking about the army, the guard, the Maryland Guard was separate. So when he apparently called to see about, he says, so they have a lot of records. He didn't get to them. He didn't realize that the records were separate from the military. And so you end up finding that out by reading the transcript. He says, this was just a means of control, a means to discredit me, to keep their secrets. Don't believe anything he says. He's a scumbag. No matter what he produces, he's a scumbag. So, ruin the messenger so that way the message gets destroyed. The interviewer says, okay, are any more questions about the background? Unknown female says, I don't think so. And then the interviewer says, all right. So they go on ahead and get started. Again, this was recorded in January 2021. And so this is really January the 8th had just happened, J6. And so you're talking about just a couple of days later. It's before Joe Biden has been inaugurated, so to speak. And so this all comes out right before then. And so, again, this is really because of Lynn Wood and, providing this platform and all of that happened to be able to get his testimony and John McGreevy's testimony and all of this transcribed and put out. So we go on and says, Ryan White is not my birth name. He goes on to talk about his various intelligence agencies. He says, so I have a background in physics, math, biology, and chemistry, graduate degrees in those, then in the military, and then as a contractor consultant for various intelligence agencies and think tanks throughout. Then in the late 90s, I became ordained so he's an ordained minister and was pretty much retired from all of that except for a think tank and consulting. But then September the 11th changed that for everyone. He says, then in 2005, he met a doctor. The doctor, he says that they became friends. The doctor's last name was Nassir, Nassir. He says a very nice man and nonviolent. He was born in Egypt into the Muslim Brotherhood. He says his childhood friend from childhood in the neighborhood all the way through high school, college, medical school, was a gentleman that went by Al-Azhar. And he says their families were mixed. But Nassir did not believe in violence. So, the doctor that he met was the one that didn't believe in the violence. So John McGreevy meets this doctor, doesn't believe in violence, especially with a country that took him in. So meaning, why would he want violence with the United States when the United States took him in and he's a doctor? So it said he would maintain those ties. His brother is the violent side, so wouldn't allow his children around the brother. And so he talked about that and said, so the doctor provided to John McGreevy a great deal of information and access to the violent side of terrorism overseas and within the United States and their structure, their financial structure, care, things like that, and the people involved, and provided many introductions. He said, I started providing this information to local law enforcement in Maryland, and it very quickly jumped to the Department of Justice in Baltimore because much of it was out of state and the crimes involved were federal level crimes. I started providing this in 2005, and in 2008, I started working directly with Rod Rosenstein out of Baltimore. And because of the access with the other agencies, the FBI, for instance, would come for corroboration of something that they were working on or just to ask questions. If I'd seen something like this, if this is related to anything, and then it grew from there. This is all John McGreevy speaking. He says, because of the undercover nature of many of the investigations that I worked on, terrorists or domestic terrorism within the country, they kept me fairly well concealed, and access was limited to a certain group headed by Rod Rosenstein. He says it became known as the Dirty Trick Squad. So you'll want to remember that in Baltimore. This is where they were using hammer, sunrise, sunset, things like that to illegally spy on people. And remember, this is after 9/11. They're already now spying on us. Corrupt. He says, attempted to corrupt judges, compromise them, Hillary Clinton, others. I mean, it was just ongoing. They concentrated on judges, but they wanted to concentrate on, and then whatever he said became inaudible, and so it didn't get transcribed. He says this was done under the guise of a CISSP, and he says operation. It's a DOJC SIMS computer operation. It was run out of Fort Washington, but had a satellite location in Baltimore. And they would illegally compromise people, illegally wiretap, break into computers, plant, reverse, change information, change emails, things of that nature. And it was in this capacity of working with them that information about the judges, Roberts and Pence, talking about Chief Justice John Roberts and Vice President Michael Pence, he says, and things like that have come out. He says, I've tried several times in the past to get it out and was thoroughly squashed by Rod, he means Rod Rosenstein, and the DOJ and the FBI to a horrible extent. I tried again in 2015, tried to end run them and go to the Department of Homeland Security. And once it got, I went there with a pile of evidence and some video and audio recordings. He said it got too large for them, I suppose, but it made its way back to the FBI and the DOJ, and they came down on us again. This was 2015. So I think he got caught trying to get some help to try and kind of squash what was going on, and it ended up being too big. And so they kind of circled back around, and he ended up kind of getting busted. And so I guess that means Rod Rosenstein found out, and the Dirty Trick Squad. He says, in 2016, I made a video discussing quite a bit of this in an effort to get it to Devin Nunes, who was head of the House Intelligence Committee at the time. But there was interference from one of the people involved, and he messed that all up. So it went largely unnoticed. But in the video, I tried to warn President Trump about the people he was dealing with daily, and especially Rod, talking about Rod Rosenstein and things like that, that they were working together to remove them, trying to compromise the people around them. And then he's inaudible, and he says when they possibly could. Now, the interviewer says, now, how were Rod Rosenstein and Mike Pence connected? And so John McGreevy goes on to say that group, I mean, they're all interconnected one way or another. That particular group was Rod Rosenstein, VP Mike Pence, and Paul Ryan. That was the core of that group. Rod was in there, but that was the core of it. It was an attempt where Rod was the brilliant legal mind behind it to remove President Trump under the 25th Amendment. He says and then it's inaudible and picks back up. It says, had an operational name for it in the beginning. Run Silent, Run Deep was the operational name. But nobody really used it for a while, and it didn't make any sense because it was such a small group. He said, but that's an old movie about somebody being passed over for a promotion, which they both felt that they were. He's referring to Rod Rosenstein and Vice President Michael Pence. They had felt like they had been passed over to be president and really resented the fact that Trump was president. He says now VP Pence hated Donald Trump because he had taken his slot as rightful president. He felt that he did, and Paul Ryan was actually considered running as well for the vice presidential slot, and Mitt Romney was also involved, but they don't. They thought President Trump was an outsider who has not paid his dues, and they just didn't like him. So once VP Pence was in there, once President Trump was elected, and obviously VP Pence, he just walked away, and everything became very quiet. That was their mole inside. So he was a mole. Pence was considered the mole. And he said so that he could run interference, meaning with Trump, and make certain things and just keep tabs on the president and manage him. The interviewer said, so was this a friendly relationship between Mike Pence and Rosenstein, or was there any kind of leverage being placed on the president or the vice president at the time? And so then John McGreevy proceeds to say there was leverage on Mike Pence because of surveillance. And y'all may not know this. So listen careful. It says from way back in 2013 time range, they had gotten some FISA warrants to exploit, and Rod had that. So Rod Rosenstein had the goods on VP Pence through some FISA warrants. He wanted the vice president slot himself. Then if they could remove President Trump, Vice President Pence would become the president, and Rod felt that it would be the natural selection for him to be put in that position. Paul Ryan felt differently, as did Mitt Romney, but that was the overall goal. Each one of them vying for the vice presidential slot. So if they could get rid of Trump, push up Pence, and then it was all going to be just a matter of which one of the three of them, Mitt Romney, Rod Rosenstein, or Paul Ryan, would end up being VP. And so they're all vying for that VP position. Rod thought he was the clear winner because of his legal brilliance and his management of the Mueller investigation. And so that's kind of, we all thought, the Mueller investigation is going to bring forth some stuff. It'll be great. Yeah, that was all. Rod Rosenstein was managing that. And so, of course, we know now that was a big nothing burger. And special counsels and things, he would be the one to remove the president, damage him so thoroughly that he could be removed, and he deserved it. So in other words, Rod was going to be, one of the ones with the kill shot to President Trump to get him out by the 25th Amendment. And then he would figure he'd get rewarded by, being chosen out of the three to become the vice president to Mike Pence being president. The interviewer says, okay, do you know what type of leverage would have existed over the vice president? So talking about Mike Pence, he says the vice president has had homosexual relationships in the past. It's not a problem. Many of them were adults. This is something that he had done throughout his time in the Congress. When he became governor, he had thought that he was free to explore them more. He says there were two specifically that they had recorded, though. A gentleman roughly 20 years his junior, meaning Vice President Mike Pence had been with somebody who was at least about 20 years, roughly 20 years younger than him. They had a fairly steady relationship. John McGreevy goes on to say there was one about half of his age that was much more sporadic because it was more dangerous, harder to get time alone. This person would introduce others, bring people with him. He'd have people waiting when he showed up. And it was that second one that introduced, meaning the second person that was about half his age, that introduced younger and younger people. He says, this is whomever, quote unquote, he's 17. So in other words, this guy who had the more sporadic relationship with Mike Pence would bring someone along and be like, hey, this is, Joey, and he's 17. And he was really 15. This is whomever, this is Billy, and he's 15. But as John McGreevy says, so this is whomever, he's 15 and he's really 13. And talking about Rod Rosenstein and Chief Justice John Roberts, a lot of the younger people involved, the ones that were brought as favors, were supplied by Jeffrey Epstein channels. So Jeffrey Epstein ends up entering into all of this at this point, says that through his channels and his people. We were able to get FISA warrants because Chief Justice John Roberts had vice court and helped prepare them. But it was also, Epstein was an intelligence asset of some type to various agencies around the world. They used his information. They exploited it for their own good. So when he was here, or his people were here, it was easy enough to justify a FISA warrant on them. They would enact a warrant, surveil everything, document it, but they would not help. And they would have not saved the child either. So you realize what they're doing. So they're worried about the FISA warrant. And so they would surveil everything. They'd catch people like Vice President Pence abusing a child. And instead of stopping that from happening, our government allowed it to continue, didn't save the child, just worried about getting the video or whatever evidence so that way they could leverage it against Pence later. You realize that's what they're talking about here. So he says it was easy enough to justify a FISA warrant on them. They would enact a warrant, surveil everything, document it, but they would not help, and they would not save the child. They would not, reveal it. It was more important for them to have the leverage on everything. This is disgusting. And of course, this was under their own corrupt ideas, but under Rod, his tutelage, and they wanted the leverage. Interviewer says, do you have any idea how Epstein and Supreme Court Justice Roberts initially would have met, or how that relationship would have developed? And then John McGreevy says how they would have met. And then let's go on ahead and watch this. We have the video for this. So let's go on ahead and watch this. This is video number 1, producer Ron. And if you go to michellemooreshow.com, there's 7 videos. And this is listed as video number 1. So just know you've already seen it. So video number 1, producer Ron, please.
Epstein and Supreme Court Justice Roberts initially would have met, or how that relationship would have developed?
How they would have met? I think he met when he was under Bush, not too long after he was appointed, somewhere along there, just a basic meeting powerful people, something like that. He did help him with his adopted children, from what was said there and what was, discussed openly in this little dirty trick squad. The children are not genetically brother and sister, but they're raised that way, so that's more valuable to them. One, if not both, were originally from Wales, but they were in the Epstein channels and were easily removed from their version of foster care to Ireland, which has much more open adoption type records. And he facilitated this for Robert so he could adopt them both at the same time. There's a little gap, but it was just paperwork. And that was him. Epstein had done that for him. So they met, they'd worked together, and he was doing favors at some point.
Was this something Supreme Court Justice Roberts would have paid for, or is this a favor exchange to Epstein to link up with these children, or?
I don't know at that point. It's possible it could be either one. I don't think there would be a payment at that point. It's more for his position. There would be something in type of favor, but I don't know either one that was done. He facilitated it. Mm-hmm. Was there payment? Was it favor? I can't say.
Okay. Can you go into any more details on Supreme Court Justice Roberts with these children and the circles that he ran in, as far as you're aware?
Children are often used as a commodity, a way to buy yourself into certain inner circles. And these people are all wealthy, they're all powerful, and they won't trust you unless you're as compromised as they are. So you provide children to them, your children, adopted children, whatever. This is how they trust you. You're as dirty as they are. You cannot be exposed because you can't expose them, they can't expose you. If everybody's just as dirty, you know you're safe. And I said this is a way for them to buy their way into these inner circles and get access to whatever. The children are the payment and the dirt and the control.
Now, who else would we want to talk to, or is there any additional documentation that we could pursue to solidify what you're saying here today?
The FBI has copies of the videos from the FISA surveillance. It was discussed, but I can't prove it, that Roberts had a copy. Rod Rosenstein certainly has a copy. Sean Henry of CrowdStrike, who was FBI at the time, he took 2 copies back to FBI with him. So the copies were made, and then it was actually Sean Bridges who encrypted them and gave them the keys.
Okay, so I want to recap. I know that it can be a little bit difficult to hear these videos. I had producer Ron enhance them as well as possible. They were way worse. And so just be aware, it may help you also to first read the transcript. Now I'm going through so many pages of the transcript today, so that way I can kind of fill in some gaps and help you as well. If this is something that you want me to finish this transcript in a show and do an extra video to finish it up, because we won't get through everything today, then I am happy to do that if it's wanted and needed. I do want to go back though, and in the beginning of the video, pretty early on, he talks about the brother and the sister, but they're not really brother and sister, that they're not genetically brother and sister. So this has to do with adoption laws and stuff in other countries. So he says they were removed from their version of foster care to Ireland. And so they were originally from Wales, which has much more open adoption type records. He says he facilitated this for Roberts. Epstein is he. So I want to make sure you understand that, so that he could adopt them both at the same time. I knew as soon as I heard this the first time, when he talked about the little boy and the little girl being adopted and not really being genetically brother and sister, and that this was more valuable to them, I knew that wasn't a good sign. And so he makes that point. And so I just want to point that out as well. He says children, in the next page, on page 10 of the transcripts, the interviewee, John McGreevy, says children are often used as the commodity. This is awfully sick. But we now know these things. Back then, I remember just being horrified, and it's so much stuff to take in at the time. But now I look back, as I know more and more, as you read this, I think my viewers, especially my regular viewers, won't be so shocked and can really grasp the level and the depth of what is being said in some of this. And so it says children are often used as the commodity, a way to buy yourself into certain inner circles. And these people are all wealthy, they're all powerful, and they don't trust you unless you're as compromised as they are. Remember the Franklin cover-up? Remember we talked about that back in the spring? And so I talked about that and found this incredible article talking about Daddy Bush and about how they worked that whole program. And so this is not far-fetched. This is right in line with the things that we know. And so he says, so they don't trust you unless, well, if I'm compromised, I got to make sure that I got as much goods on you. He says, so you provide children to them. It could be your children. Now think back to these Biden videos that we saw. Well, it's like, well, that senator or that congressman or that, whatever politician standing right there and his daughter is being sniffed by Biden. I mean, what's going on here? Yeah, well, we're finding out. So it says, so you provide children to them, your children, adopted children, whatever. So you see where this is going with Chief Justice John Roberts adopted a little boy and little girl. He said, and you'll hear it in a minute. He says, this is how they trust you. You're as dirty as they are. You cannot be exposed because you can't expose them. And they can't expose you. If everybody's just as dirty, then you're all safe. See how it works? And so anyways, and so we have a viewer that says, John and Lynn are true heroes in this battle. They both woke me up back years ago. God bless them. Yes, that's what I'm saying. Why is nobody else talking about Lynn Wood and about John McGreevy? These are some things I've been asking myself. And like I said, yesterday morning, getting ready, drying my hair out takes a minute. And so I'm drying my hair out and I'm thinking about, nobody really talks about Lynn Wood. Why is that? And so there's just been some other things that have happened as well recently that have to do with Lynn Wood that has opened my eyes to going back and revisiting some things and going, yeah, I'm doubling down, Lynn Wood. And I'm wanting to bring your attention to these things. And then when I talked with the whistleblower and some other people, it was like that have come forward, it's like, okay, these were what my suspicions were. This is all confirming. I'm getting confirmation from many places. And so we've played many videos through this year that have only backed up these things as well. And so Lynn is the one who has provided audio recordings and videos of his conversations with all different kinds of people, right? And so he's where we could hear the other people saying things specifically, whether it was General Flynn or what's the other guy, Patrick? Oh, the multimillionaire, I forget his name, but that's Flynn's kind of backer financially. And so these people we've heard. I think what happened is they tried to infiltrate. Yeah, Patrick Byrne, thank you. And so I think they tried to infiltrate Lynn Wood from everything that we can tell. And look, it happens. You get infiltrated, and then you realize, and then you go, I got to get out of this. And so it happens because they come knocking. And so it's no doubt about it, right? What a racket. Great in-depth information on this topic by Celeste. Thank you, Celeste. And so, what a racket. And it is in-depth by going through this, because where my concern is, even though it's so much, and we're talking about this transcript being over 100 pages, but some of it, a good portion of it, you can take out because it's got like word count on different topics and things. And so it's good. But like Janine MHF says, Lynn was smart enough to record them. Yes. Again, though, going back to the photo with President Donald Trump and Lynn Wood. Now, there are people that got pardoned that never even got a photo with President Trump. And then you have to look at the photo. But there's only been one other time I've known President Donald J. Trump to smile so big. And see that big smile? Big smile. Now, when was the other time that he smiled this big? It was when he was with the Pope, and it looked like he was the cat that ate the canary. And so, as we know now, other things were going on in that meeting. It wasn't because he was excited to be with the Pope, right? And so, just saying, this is all very interesting. So when I saw this, I've always gone back to this. And I believe that Lynn Wood was actually, I didn't think about this until just now. What was the name of the law firm that he was at? Mercer. So Mercer. I believe that about 6 weeks after Lynn Wood took this photo with President Trump, could have been about 5. I believe he was, I could be completely wrong, but I believe he was, for lack of a better word, activated. And the way that I believe he was activated, I think there was a sign that was sent. And here's what the sign was. Mike Pompeo tweeted out, and it was a photo of, I think he was in the photo with a puppy. He was announcing that their family had just gotten a puppy. The puppy's name was Mercer. And I kept thinking, Mercer, Mercer, Mercer. I know that name. I know that name. Where do I know that name from? And then it hit me. It's the law school that Lynn Wood had attended. In fact, there was even at that time a law practice courtroom that Linwood, I think, gave $1 million to. Could have been 1.2. I think it was $1 million. But there was a big brouhaha months later, and from the time that this was taken. But I believe he was activated, and that's when he really went, I think, full-fledged on X. Now or Twitter. At the time, it was Twitter. And so, but I made that connection because of the supposed name of the dog. Never seen the dog since with Mike Pompeo. Can't tell you much. Don't know if Pompeo's good or bad. And so, you see things, hear things that you just don't even know anymore. But the smile, yes, Celeste, the smile. And so I'm like, something's up with this picture. And so I've always remembered it. That's why I went searching for it this morning to make sure that you saw it. Okay, well, we're going to go on ahead and pick up for where the video left off. And so it says, the interviewer says, and who would be on these tapes most likely as far from your conversations in the Dirty Trick Squad? John McGreevy says, well, from just those tapes when I was talking about the copies, he says, John McGreevy says, well, that would be Roberts, Chief Justice John Roberts. Excuse me. He says, those would be Pence and his two lovers and the younger ones. See, remember, they had those FISA warrants and they were busy getting the goods on Mike Pence. And so it's his gay lovers. Okay. Okay. So Justice 7777 says, Michelle, I would love to hear more episodes on this. There is so much for people to learn, but people, please buckle up. It's going to be a very disgusting, disturbing, bumpy ride. Yes. Because there's a lot of stuff in this. Okay. So, this is important. John McGreevy is very important. He's no longer with us. He suddenly died last year in May. I think they claim it was a heart attack. I just find it hard to believe. So I'll have to go back and look into that about what they claim. This was mostly in the country, illegal. Now this is still McGreevy talking. This was mostly in country. And so KCQ 1776 says this is such a tangled web of corruption. Geez, yes, Casey, yes. This is very important. And now when I look back at these from when I read them back when they first came out, it's just so much that you go, this man was telling the truth. I just absolutely believe it. Why else would he be sitting down? And let's go back to thinking about his situations. And so he says, and that's the thing. Let me stop. I got to tell you something. I had a big aha moment on Saturday morning. So at the end of the day, you have everybody, is man or woman. And, we all have a choice. This is what really hit me. When you talk to whistleblowers and you talk to different people, and ultimately what all roads lead to the same exact place. I am telling you. And then in that same place for all of us, doesn't matter who's got what position, what degrees, what they know, what they don't know, how smart, how whatever, how blue collar, how white collar, it does not matter. We all have the same place we come to, and that is the fork in the road. Are you going to speak up when you know evil people are doing evil things? And that's what is going on. John McGreevy spoke up. He was a very smart man. He had a unique situation, very brilliant, had a lot of education. And like he said, well, I was retired, except for the Guard. And then 9/11 happened. And then I met this guy. And I think sometimes, of course, God knew John McGreevy would speak up. And because he is the Alpha and the Omega, he is the beginning and the end. And I think that, he met that doctor for a reason who had those ties and was able to help our government. But, sometimes those things get reported. And what happens? It gets used for bad. And so, or evil, not just bad, but just pure evil. I'm sorry, y'all. I keep just thinking about how they let Mike Pence abuse boys, children. That right there tells me that Rod Rosenstein is as low as it gets, dirtbag. Okay. So that he could at some point be controlled by Rosenstein. Rosenstein wanted the goods on Pence and whoever else. Like, this is our government. This is our government at some of the highest levels. This is our government. Unbelievable. Okay. So, it is what it is, right? And we have to realize how bad it is so that then we can start saying, okay, we're not going to keep falling for this stuff. And also, this tells you what we need to be praying. So take away from this about what you need to be praying for. and how bad the prayers move the heart of the Lord. And so we've got to be praying against this evil and for the children. All right. So the interviewer says that would be Robert's. He says, excuse me, that would be Pence and his two younger lovers and the younger ones, the children. He says there were also, well, they would do the same illegal surveillance and or sometimes, and then it gets inaudible. And he says this was mostly in the country, illegal surveillance with Robert's kids, the little boy and the little girl that were adopted, and whomever they were with. They'd set it up. They knew that they weren't going to be exposed because it was Chief Justice John Roberts' children. In other words, well, if they're abusing, hey, if we're going to use John Roberts' kids, well, we're safe. It ain't going to be exposed. We're all good because it's all, good in the hood in the group. And so that's why John Roberts is adopting a little boy and a little girl so that they can pass them around in this group of, people. It's just absolute insanity. And so please keep in mind that these children, this is John McGreevy speaking, please keep in mind that these children have been abused since birth. And I don't want anything else happening. So this tells you where John McGreevy was coming from. He says they've already lived through hell. They don't need anything else. But they were getting loaned out for these different groups, and they did surveil many of them. So in other words, this little boy and or little girl they're showing up in some of these tapes, is what he's saying. And they were being used. The interviewer says, okay, now you also said in past discussions that there was a plot that Roberts was allegedly a part of where they discussed murdering other judges on the Supreme Court under Hillary Clinton's administration. So can you give me some amplifying details on that? And so John McGreevy says this is something the FBI set up under their guidance. So the FBI, they're political people, going to be a false flag. This is something I would have missed 4 years ago, underlined it today. The only thing underlined on the whole page in red. He says this had gone out 2 years almost before the election, and it was a sovereign citizen group. He says Obama did not want any terrorism unless it was white terrorism. So this was a sovereign citizen group that the FBI had infiltrated and armed and instigated against other targets. They were for the most part pro-America, but they were racist in some of their other origins. He says they were, well, a lot of them were divorced fathers with a grudge against the court system anyway. And the FBI people had infiltrated and exploited this. They moved them up to the level of assassinating federal judges, political people, and things like that. You want the names? I can tell you. So this is still John McGreevy speaking. So anyway, part of and some of it gets inaudible, and he says was various types of attacks on the Supreme Court to take down as many judges as they could. And John Roberts, was aware of this. He actually provided some scheduling because apparently the justices were not all there at the same time. They come and they go as they please. And so these three would be working on something. And these three, and he provided this to the group so that they could finalize their plan. So in other words, he was providing the scheduling of the judges and when they would be where, so that way they could know when to try to assassinate these judges. He says they were very, very close to what they were trying to do. They were given explosives. This is the group, the sovereign citizen group. So they were given explosives, all type of automatic weapons. They had rocket launchers, and they were very close to it. They were going to assassinate F. Dennis Saylor, a federal judge in Massachusetts, Martha Coakley, Lisa Monaco, and her family. They were going to make that look like a home invasion and film it until later when they needed it. He says this was their initial attack plan, and then the Supreme Court. This was a group that got infiltrated on their request. And when I found out what they were doing, that they were going to attack these judges, they were going to attack the Supreme Court, I tried to run them. So end, E-N-D hyphen run, R-U-N them, end run, okay? I had minders, M-I-N-D-E-R-S. I guess he means kind of like spies. He says people kept tabs on me. Oh, they were the minders were probably keeping tabs on him. He says I had FBI minders, so the FBI. But I tried to end run them and expose it. I took all the evidence and it went to Homeland Security, so where they were overwhelmed and called in the FBI. And he says, and then the DOJ came right back to me and they picked me up in just a few weeks later. So when they found who it was, He says the damage to their plots had been done. So he got caught, but the damage had already been done. So he was able to successfully do what he was trying to do, but and save these people. He says they did get close to assassinating people up there. At Lisa Monaco, the judges were under 24/7 security. Martha Coakley had in-state security, and it did prevent them from going after the Supreme Court. Although their plans were all out, they had the maps, they had the weapons, they had everything planned. So at least it prevented something like that. The interviewer then asks John McGreevy, now, were the teams that were supposed to do the actual operations against the judges, were those Americans or were they foreign? He says, no, they were Americans. Interviewer asks, okay, or says, okay. And then John McGreevy says a third would be, so a third of the team were sovereign citizen group and 2/3 were going to be FBI. Sounds like something else. J6. Okay. Or people working with the FBI. So it was either going to be 2/3 would be people that were the FBI people or people working with the FBI. They were going to get rid of them anyway. And actually, I have recordings of their planning on the phone with me, as part of this group. And then they did not hang up the phone. They did not kill the phone. And we were listening to them talk about killing me and my wife, things like that. And another time they actually butt dialed me and they were talking about, like, he was on the phone talking to various people about their plans, about who they were going after and what they were going to do to us because we knew too much and we were outside all the time. He said, so they could not do their plan. We got the people under surveillance. We saved them, got credit for saving them. They were very upset that their plans had gone to crap. And they were very upset with me, especially when they came and picked me up, but it stopped it. In other words, look, they came and got me. I got caught. I got busted. They found out it was me, but it worked. And so these people and their families didn't get murdered. He said their plans were written out. They had maps. They had surveillance. They had quite a bit of equipment. He said that was the timeline. And so the interviewer says, what was the timeline that they were hoping to do this in? The interviewee, John McGreevy, says this would be right after, well, y'all brace yourselves. He says, well, this would be right after, within the first year of Hillary Clinton's presidency. She was not supposed to lose. So this was all planned up, and it was more than just then. It was twofold. They wanted to pack the court, and talking about the Supreme Court, and take out just as many as they could. Roberts was actually helping because he didn't want to be one of them. So in other words, he's like, well, they're going to take out some people on the Supreme Court. I don't want to be one of them, so I'm going to provide the schedules, right? So he's helping them. And not only is he helping them, but he wanted to get to choose who would be on the bench after that. And so he wanted to maintain some form of control. So he did provide information. But this was to be done within the first year of Hillary Clinton's campaign so that they could ban firearms as well and impact the Supreme Court. So they'd have plenty of time to do that. That was their two main goals. The interviewer asks John McGreevy, do you believe that the death of Antonin Scalia was a part of the same plot? Or is that, like, do you know if that was a separate? And then John McGreevy says, it was the same people. He says, he was a backup plan. He was their biggest threat, being the most conservative judge. Justice Scalia, actually, I believe, this is John McGreevy talking. Justice Scalia, actually, I believe he found out about this, the plans. He found out about the plans, and he went to the White House. He says, like a week before his death, I believe he found out what they were trying to do when they moved away from the overall attack of where these people lived. Or, they would attack around the holidays when more than one justice would be in their home, things like that. And again, Roberts was providing all this. He says, but they had to take him out. He was seen as their biggest obstacle. So talking about Justice Scalia. So the same basic group that was involved were given access to the ranch where he was found. I don't know if you know that, or remember that when Scalia was murdered or died, whatever the official talking point was, he was out. He was at a ranch, and I don't remember if it was like a hunting ranch or something they were doing. He says they talked about it, about how they did it. They had a couple of different options, but it was discussed prior to his death what they intended to do, where they could possibly do it, how they could do it, and who they would need. The records are there at the and so this is where he was. He was at a ranch, and Cibolo, Cibolo is how you spell it, Cibolo Ranch. One person was brought in. There were 3 men. He says there was 3 men. That's the way it's written. One person was brought in as a temp worker. The other 2, same team, were brought in as servants for a group that was there hunting. So it was a hunting lodge or something, ranch. And they discussed how it was done, that they used, and he calls it dispo, and then he has it, it's like dimethyl sulfate, foxade, I don't know. It's a long word, which is a fairly inert chemical. It just goes through your skin, but if you mix it with a poison or a drug or something like that, it'll go directly in your system and overload you. I believe that's why he was found with a pillow over his face. He was struggling to breathe. He couldn't breathe. He was choking. And this particular chemical, you can tailor it to the person. If you have a drug problem, you can put fentanyl in it and overdose them. If they have a heart condition, it would take very little to go directly in. It would be like a direct injection to the heart, and they talk about how they did it. He says, and Roberts is on the phone with these people discussing the successor. He's trying to talk about who's going to be the person who was going to replace Antonin Scalia. And they wanted a say in it, or he wanted a say in it, because now it was only going to be one person, and he wanted to pick that one person. Remember, they were wanting to kill 3, but they got busted. John McGreevy's plan of busting it up happened, and so now they're down to just the backup plan, and that's Antonin Scalia. Now they've succeeded in that, and now Chief Justice John Roberts is on the phone trying to saying, I want to say in who's going to be the replacement. And so it says, and he wanted to pick that person, and he wanted to say in who was going to take the position, is what he means. And of course, there was a lot of people that were talking about Eric Holder taking it, all kinds of people, but he wanted to say in who was going to take over Justice Scalia's spot. And I don't think that he got it. I mean, obviously it didn't happen because President Trump was there, but he did want it. And this was all prior. The discussions and him complaining that he wasn't getting any say prior to his death, his sudden death. So it was all well known. And then the interviewer says, so aside from Roberts being, and then it becomes inaudible on this, he goes, did Rosenstein or another outside of the White House, had they been made aware of the plans, perhaps in Hillary's camp, that you can speak about? So in other words, who else knew? You know, KM Sunshine 1974 says, Michelle, you're on fire today. Love it. Yeah, we got a lot to cover in a short amount of time. So and I just happen to know some backstories on some of this, so I'm trying to fill in some blanks for you. The interviewee says, so John McGreevy says, Hillary and Obama knew about it. I mean, it was supposed to be done under her watch, her term, so that they could pack the court. They were fully aware of it. Now, I didn't look it up. But Antonin Scalia was, I'm just realizing this, he was found dead. It was like January the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. It was the first week of January. It was over the holiday, just like he says and explains a few pages back. Remember when the chief justices would be home and they're looking at the schedule, more likely to be home and stuff. So on their holiday break. And so that's what happened. Scalia was at this ranch, and this is what happened. He says so Hillary and Obama knew, they were fully aware of it. Rod was he has an intense hatred of Hillary, even though he worked with her and he had to. He's not fond of Obama, really. He's only fond of himself. This is John McGreevy talking about Rod Rosenstein. But this was plans to be enacted through them, and Rod was integral to wanting the hammer system through Baltimore. This was why he was the only U.S. attorney to keep his job under Obama. Now Obama fired every U.S. attorney at the same time except for Rod. He was the only one, and this is why. Because he was running things for them. He was involved in their plans. He was running the hammer and things through Baltimore. So the interviewer asks, so you've also done interviews as to like switching channels slightly, but I'm sure it'll tie back together. The death of Seth Rich. Interviewee, John says, Interviewer says, and Rod Rosenstein was witting in this operation as well, I believe, correct? And the John McGreevy says, yes, coughs, drinks water. Okay, sorry. He was for their reasons, for the illegal reasons, but he was for their reasons, THEIR, their reasons, for the illegal reasons, but also to cover himself. When Seth Rich was gone in the first time, when Seth Rich had gone in the first time, I just don't have much information on it other than what I was told, but not what I had seen personally. His first contact with WikiLeaks, I just don't know. I do know that when he went to him, so he says, I do know that when he went to him the second time and came back, WikiLeaks had directed him on how to get further information, and they wanted specific things. Look here, look there, here, because then he went in for the break-in. He grabbed a lot of information, just downloaded everything that he could that exposed a lot. They were worried about the exposure. This is why you got to see today's show before you see Friday's show. Okay? This is one of many reasons. Okay? So Seth Rich was a Bernie supporter. He worked at the DNC, and he was finding out that they were cheating. The DNC was cheating. Like we already know, right? Like they gave the questions, ahead of time and stuff. And you just offer kinds of stuff that people like Donna Brazile was connected to the DNC. He says the DNC, Hillary and Bowser, Bowser and Brazile, talking about Donna Brazile. Okay. So at first he says Abrams, but he meant Brazile. Bowser is, Donna Brazile and Mayor Bowser are gay lovers. I don't know if they're married or however that goes, but both women. Bowser was the mayor of DC during J6, but also when Seth Rich was murdered. And her significant other was Donna Brazile. Now, Donna Brazile was the black lady with the short hair that was just repulsive on Fox. She was just a mean, nasty lady and just nasty. Well, she was, of course, connected with all of this with Hillary and the DNC. Okay, so this is very important when it comes to the Seth Rich murder. Okay, and so he says, excuse me, Bowser and Brazile. And he says they were all worried about it, but Rod was personally worried about it as well because he had been authoring stuff to affect Hillary Clinton, and he didn't want that to come out because he would be out of it. He would be done. He would be appointed. He would not be appointed to anything, and he had a personal interest in that one. So when it got dumped in his lap to handle the problem, he tapped people who he'd already worked with for years who were dirty and that he controlled, talking about Rod Rosenstein. So you realize, I want to go back to this, just make sure you understand. So it gets dumped in Rod's lap to get that jump drive that Seth Rich was carrying around with him all the time of stuff that he was planning to give to WikiLeaks that he had gotten from the DNC. Now, they don't know where he got the stuff. I don't know exactly how. And that's what you're going to hear more on Friday. But what happened is they're trying to figure out, what's going on here. He's upset. He's telling WikiLeaks. He's working with WikiLeaks. They owed their continued federal careers to him. Now, Rod Rosenstein ends up finding out what's going on, and he knows that some stuff he's been doing to backstab Hillary Clinton is on that jump drive. So I want to make sure y'all realize that. So Rod Rosenstein, this is very important. Rod ended up being like, oh, this is great because it gets dumped on my lap to make sure this gets taken care of. So they owed their continued federal careers to him. He had saved them before, looked over things, allowed them to continue their career. And then there's a little bit of inaudible people around him in one small circle in Baltimore. The interviewer asks John McGreevy, so was it intended to be an assassination of Seth Rich, or was it more intended to be a robbery, or do you know? Did they mean to kill him, or were they just wanting the jump drive? And so John McGreevy says, intended to be a robbery, rough him up. All they wanted was the thumb drive that he routinely carried with him, the information he was going to pass on to WikiLeaks, but what he had uncovered and all, and more focused information that WikiLeaks had requested. That's what they wanted. He did not leave it at home. He always carried it because he had people living with him. And again, Rod was very upset that this could expose everything and wreck his plans, meaning Rod's plans. He would have been done. So because Hillary was going to find out what old Rod had been up to. That's what Rod was worried about. If it was a fairly tenuous relationship, you know, him being a Republican and things, but he had proven himself to be really dirty like they were. And just because Rod said he was a Republican, in other words, he was doing their dirty work for the Democrats and willing to give access to everything he was doing for them. So he had to recover it, and they didn't care. He did not care how it was done, except for it was supposed to be robbed, meaning just a robbery. They had to recover it, did not care. But Rod put the additional things on it, was get it no matter how. That was where things went wrong. Because Rod, they really didn't mean to kill Seth Rich, but he had said, look, do whatever you got to do, get it no matter how. Well, when it happened, let's see. He says he tapped his agent friend from the DEA. Don't you just love this stuff? Like, this is what our government's doing. Who had covered for many times, and he's dirty in Baltimore and other places throughout Maryland, and then put him in charge of it. He recruited someone else, and then they went down. And this particular DEA agent is the gang specialist. This one was a shocker for me back when I learned all this. Is a gang specialist for the DEA and specializes further in MS-13. So guess who they hired? He was the one who went outside the local people and hired. And then it gets inaudible, and he goes, found the two MS-13 people down south and brought them up or met them. Actually, he says they came up and met him, and he brought them into the city, and things went poorly beyond that. They were supposed to rob him, talking about Seth Rich. This is John McGreevy speaking. Then the two guys went ahead and killed him, shot him. He died later. Seth Rich died later. They recovered the thumb drive, which was then switched for one that Rod had provided. So there was a thumb drive found on him. Pretty smart. You know, you can't say, you got to give it to these people. They're not stupid always. So they took the thumb drive they needed that incriminated Rod Rosenstein and many other people, I'm sure, and put a new one on there. The one that Sean had loaded up for him previously. So he did. It was able to, he was able to recover, keep his involvement in altering emails, breaking into Clinton's servers, things like that. And and then the interviewer interrupts him and says, so they switched a thumb drive that was on the body for a thumb drive that Rod had prepared to be left behind as John McGreevy says, right. And the interviewer says, okay. And then John McGreevy says, one that would be convincing, but not expose him. So Rod gave some good stuff up, but didn't expose anything for Rod, of course. And so let's look. So Natalie Howard says, I love this stuff. Can't wait for Friday. Yep. All right. Celeste Kant, she says, did you just sneeze out January J6? Yeah. All right. So the interviewee, John McGreevy, says a lot of it was the same information, but not. He says, because they knew where the breaches had occurred. So a lot of it was the same thing, just void of anything that would point toward them or Rod specifically. And things rapidly fell downhill because they couldn't break into it. It was encrypted. They got it to a couple of different people. They couldn't get into it, and they decided to clean up the mess. And one DE agent went down to the following day, called out sick, took his wife's car and drove down and killed them. He killed the MS-13 gang members, things like that. So it went bad quickly once he died. It's supposed to be a robbery. And the next thing they hear is, Donna Brazile and Muriel Bowser, remember the mayor of DC, were at the hospital. So Seth Rich arrives at the hospital, and Donna Brazile and the DC mayor waiting on him, before he was even brought in. They beat him to the hospital. And they did have people at the crime scene as well, and they were there to recover it. As I said, the jump drive. Now they're going to get the replaced jump drive. As I said, it was supposed to be a robbery. He was supposed to be, you know, beat up, unconscious, bad shape, and they wanted to recover the thumb drive. That's all they were there for. And so the interviewer asks John McGreevy, so back to Rod Rosenstein for a moment. What can you tell us about his involvement with foreign nations with any type of intelligence transfer to groups outside of the country? This goes back to the FBI, John McGreevy says, operation called Ghost Stories. It was very successful. They just kept heavy surveillance on known Russian assets within the United States, everything they were doing, whatever they found, you know, what they were communicating back. It was just surveillance. But if you knew what they were sending back, then it would go the other way. You could tell what they were accessing and what they had access to. Thoroughly good operation. It was supposedly very successful. It was Obama and Biden who did the Russian reset, along with Secretary Clinton, and they didn't want any problems with the Russians. Then something gets said that's inaudible, and then he says, so they told them to cancel it. Well, they didn't. They kept their communication open with them. It just changed. Instead of just surveillance, they started communicating. They started providing information, and initially it was wrong, but they started, you know, giving in to them to an exchange type of situation. When they started altering the information, giving them inaccurate information, they were working with them from the other side. Rod was aware of this. He was part of it at this time, because once he was shut down, it became under the heading of the DOJ in Maryland and DC. So he was part of it. And then they were giving us this information. They tried to pay him and it didn't work. He got, you know, he was like, well, oh, no, because they were coming towards 2015, 16 at the time. And he was angling for a big position, Attorney General, Supreme Court, then hopefully Vice President. So he didn't want anything like that to pop up. And so he goes on and says, well, Sean Bridges was actually taking the money that they were offering. He was laundering it through Bitcoin around the world. And Rod was hyper pissed when he found out. It's one of the reasons he went after Sean and put him in jail. He's still there. So this is a guy named Sean Bridges. And so the deal was, you get 6 years, keep your mouth shut, or we'll go after you for everything and you'll get 40 years. But he started talking, had too much access when he was in. And they brought him out to Virginia, where he's at now, kept an eye on him. So that's all the beginning part. They get into Mike Pence and some details. There's plenty of stuff that's going on in all of this. There are 7 videos, and the whole transcript is available on MichelleMooreShow.com. We're going to do another section. This is what it looks like. It's 100 and something pages, but really, we're going to skip to the back. There is a section that was a shocker for me back when I read it the first time. And so we're going to go on ahead and we're going to talk about it as well. So this section is called Interview About Judge. Okay. And so this is actually Judge Emmett G. Sullivan. So he says, so the interviewer says, this is the very beginning of this section. It says, all right, again, thanks for sitting with us again. This is another video. We're going to ask you what you can tell us about Judge Sullivan and his affiliations and pedophilia allegations. John McGreevy says, I met Gail Sullivan Jr., the judge in the General Flynn case. He's disgusting. He's a known pedophile, a friend of Biden's. He's the one that owned the homes that Biden used for his, and then it gets inaudible. He says Sullivan likes young girls. He has abused his granddaughter for years. When she got older, he lost interest, and she actually dated her own father intimately. So incest. He took her to her proms, things like that. She bragged about it online. I have all those records. She bragged on Facebook and things about dating her father, and he was really good and, you know, very generous and all this stuff. But both the father and son are vehement racists. They don't like Black people. They think Black people bring them down. They make them look bad because they're so good and the other people are terrible. That's why they like ripping off Howard University, because it's not doing them any good anyway. You know, they're nobody. It's a strange concept to me anyway. But Sullivan, the judge, when the granddaughter was younger, she was on Skype in her bedroom. Y'all know what Skype is. It's like Zoom. And so she was on her computer and she was on Skype. And this was one of the videos that I'd seen. She was on Skype in her bedroom, and This was when Skype was fairly new, and she heard him coming and jumped in the bed. He didn't know that it was on. And like I said, it wasn't common at the time. She was talking to one of her friends. So he comes in and abuses her. He gets her in bed and she's performing oral sex on him. And he's, mildly abusive, I guess. He says, do like I told you, not like this. Ugh. And so, what he wasn't aware of is that other people were seeing this because it scared the children on the other end of the Skype. And so someone got their parents. There was nothing they could do. They didn't discuss it. Some of them will discuss it. They actually witnessed it as it was happening because they don't like it. So if somebody were to offer them something decent, they would come forward with what they saw. The interviewer says, one of the families screen recorded this. Is this what you believe happened? And then John McGreevy says, somebody has a recording of it because I've seen the recording. He says, I don't know which, and then it gets inaudible and he says was made, but I know which family recorded it. And so the interviewer says, and then John McGreevy says, but they were able to do so. So there is a tape of it and you can clearly see him when he walks in. That's him. The poor child has never known anything but hell. She, like I said, they're racist, him and his son, and they told her she was nothing but garbage her whole life, to the point where she has hurt herself trying to lighten her skin. And if you see her online, she's actually changed her appearance, lightened her skin so much that she looks Asian, because she doesn't want to be black because they've always told her that it's horrible, horrible, horrible. But she's altered herself, and that's that much. She doesn't look like she did when she was a child. She doesn't even look black. She looks Asian, and that's because of the abuse, the continuous abuse from all of them and what they told her. She was worthless. So yeah, that's how Judge Sullivan is. As I said, now this is John McGreevy still speaking uninterrupted. As I said, he owned the homes. So as I said, Sullivan, owned the homes that he allowed this to take place in, and other people would visit. The people would go to the shore, go to the beach, and that was the code. He had 3 or 4 of them that Biden would use, all basically the same single-family homes, large 2-car garages that could be closed, and the child normally in there. Interviewer says, and you said Judge Sullivan offered his granddaughter to Biden and Biden turned this down? Yeah, Biden doesn't like black people at all, but especially black girls. He has no interest in. He's racist. He's a turd. There was an incident where it was reported that it was the judge's son, Sullivan's son, where he had raped the granddaughter, his daughter, and raped her very bad. She had to go to the hospital. There were hospital records for this. John McGreevy continues and says, and there was another girl present there at the same time. There was actually 2. Well, it wasn't the son. It was actually the judge who did it. He had raped them both and got very violent and left the girls on the floor, didn't care. But it was Biden and who had, basically told him, he was like, I don't want this crap around here, too close to exposing him. So he, the judge who had committed the rape, got his son to take the rap for him, and he got him to immediately move back to Maryland, where he turned himself in. As a judge, he could control it. Now, if the judge was arrested, he had no control. But they wanted to first and foremost move it away from Biden, get it out of Delaware, and they did, even though the records and everything happened up here. So they moved it out of Maryland. The son, he took the charge for his father, because if you charge the son, you can't help the father, political. And so he says, and then they just buried it with the help of Rod Rosenstein, Elijah Cummings, and Catherine Poe, P-U-G-H, who Cummings is obviously deceased, but at the time, he was very big in Maryland politics. Catherine Poe was the mayor of Baltimore. And it was just, it's still in the books. You can find it. If you look on case search in Maryland, like the federal system, Pacer, it's still in there. You could find it. The interviewer says, what year was it? He says 2012. I want to say off the top of my head, but you can find it. And then it gets inaudible for a second. And he says, made it disappear. And then the father and Rod, or why they helped cover it. And then he says to protect Biden and exposing anything else. Years later, he was packed up. The son, in an internet. Oh, years later, he was picked up. The son he's talking about in an internet porn sting in Maryland. And this came up. And because they crossed, same type of thing, he was inaudible, buried down to the same people. Rod did it and everything, buried that one. He was trading pictures online. And there you go. So they buried that one too. He got away with everything. So there's definitely leverage all over the judge. Interesting. So then interviewer says, yes, I mean, just the relationship with Obama and Biden. Obama's probably aware of all of this. Question. John McGreevy says, Obama? Certainly. Well, I mean, Eric Holder is great friends with Judge Sullivan, and so is Elijah Cummings, and they're all great friends with this stuff. I mean, Sullivan was even aware in some fashion about the plot with the Supreme Court because of Holder, talking about Eric Holder, who had who was tapped to be one of the Supreme Court justice replacements. But Sullivan and Holder were very, very close, and they'd helped each other many times. So yeah, they were certainly aware of it. Obama certainly knew. I mean, Obama would send Biden back with anything he wanted to keep it quiet, just to keep him out of their hair in D.C. Biden very rarely, if ever, stayed in D.C. overnight. There was always a caravan back or something, a train back. The interviewer says, okay, I guess we can call it there. And so that's the end of that section. So there's a Joe Biden section that's next. And so we'll cover that when we reconvene on all of this. So these are two sections that we've already covered that comes out of all this. Don't let it be intimidating if you decide that you want to read the transcript between now and the next time I do this, which will be in the next week or so. We've already got next week pretty much scheduled out. So we'll have to see when we can fit it in. If somebody cancels, we'll keep it as something that, if somebody cancels or has to postpone, something comes up, an emergency, then we'll be able to run it then. But these are some things that you needed to hear. Be aware of Judge Sullivan and some of the stuff that he was doing and how he's linked to Biden and all of that, because on Friday, you're going to hear some things firsthand from a new whistleblower that is at a John McGreevy level. And you're going to want to just be aware that these people are out there. This all also links back to Linwood. I want to make sure that you realize that these videos that you see at michellemooreshow.com, it's the first black rectangle. I've already got it up there for you. The folder has the transcript and it has 7 videos. Producer Ron has already enhanced all the audio so that you can hear it as well as possible. And so again, it was bad audio in the beginning. And so we've worked really hard to try to get it just as clear for you as possible. But these were all actually released on Linwood's Telegram. And so, well, the videos, some of the videos were over time, I found more videos. And so I kept them. They may overlap some, and I deleted a couple today because they were repeats. But this was initially where I found it, was on Linwood's Telegram channel. This is who I always refer to as the Linwood whistleblower. It's not whistleblowing on Linwood. It's Linwood helped him to come forward and bring this information. It was Linwood who revealed it. I think we know people by their fruit, and I think that this is excellent information. So many times I will talk to somebody and I'll bring up the Linwood whistleblower and they'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so they'll know who Linwood is, but they won't know about the whistleblower. And so they don't know John McGreevy's name. It's very interesting. And so do you know about John McGreevy's recording that's 13 minutes long, where he talks about sin like a Flynn is what it's called? So there's a 13-minute video. We've played it before. We're going to play it now for you. And we want you to hear this. So this is John McGreevy's voice. And what I'm being told is there are people that have avoided saying John McGreevy's name. If you listen, he sounds like someone else that's a politician or that backs up the politicians. He's not an actual politician, but he backs them up. And so he's like, serves in one of the 3-letter agencies. And someone corrected in an interview, no, that's not that person, but avoided telling John McGreevy's name. So remember what I said about Linwood? No one seems to like to talk about Linwood much. And no one really seems to like to talk about John McGreevy much. So that tells me that I need to be talking about Linwood and John McGreevy. So that's what we're doing today. And so we're going to show you Sin Like a Flynn. Reportedly, in this audio, he's talking to someone. It's about 13 minutes long. Reportedly, he is he's directed all this conversation to General Michael Flynn. He never tells you that, but you can see where someone else had already said, Sin Like a Flynn is the top of the topic. So this is General Michael Flynn. And a couple of minutes in, he's going to talk about he gave you a second chance. The he is President Donald J. Trump. Okay, so reportedly he has repeated this a number of times. And so I want you to be able to hear this audio if you're not familiar with it. And if you have heard it before, I would really encourage you to listen. Just listen to it, because I think sometimes, like I was saying earlier, as we know more information, as time has gone by, we hear things now that we go, oh, wow. And I want to remind you of something about a month ago that President Donald J. Trump said. Do you remember that he said on J6, nobody was murdered, nobody was killed? Okay, so why would he say that? Didn't we see Ashley Babbitt being killed at J6? I mean, supposedly. And so he said no one was killed. His words, not ours. And so let's go on ahead. This is what John McGreevy looks like. And of course, Attorney Lynn Wood. And so let's go on ahead and listen to this Sin Like a Flynn. And now looking back, knowing what you know about J6, and again, preparing you for Friday, let's take a listen.
I'm sure everyone can figure out who I'm speaking to. I have been in and around government a long time. I was around Fort Bragg before you got there. I was involved with JSOC before, during, and a little bit after your first meltdown. I was already associated with DIA and was there when you had your big meltdown. You didn't even last a year. Of course, they let you stay for a few more months while your replacement was vetted so you could save a little face. That's when you really turned against the country. And then a man gave you a second chance. And you betrayed him. You betrayed his trust. Of course, that's nothing for a man who's already betrayed his country. Your betrayal goes way back. I go way, way back too. You yourself and other family members have called me a brother, called me family, tried to recruit me, as you have recruited so many others in the past. See, I go way back before you even thought of the coup attempt and the January 6th plans. We all know Miss Babbitt, Ashley Babbitt. But see, I go way back before that, back when her name wasn't Babbitt. Anybody researching Ashley Babbitt usually stops at California. Miss Babbitt used to live in Maryland, except her name wasn't Babbitt then. I go way back before that even. You see, I was the one on the court records, the sealed national security transcripts that broke up the so-called terrorist ring that was going to attack Calvert Cliffs nuclear power plant in Maryland, killing untold thousands of people. I got credit for it. People came out and said Mohammed el-Shinawi was a lone wolf, acted by himself, material support of ISIS. No one would listen to his team. They didn't want to hear it, even though the FBI interviewed a couple of them. They didn't do anything. His one team member ended up killing a bunch of people in Chattanooga, Tennessee. The others provided plans for drones and bombs overseas that killed our own troops and some of our allies. This was years ago, 2015, years before the January 6th. The reason I bring it up is because Ashley Babbitt and her first husband and her boyfriend, who became her second husband, worked at Calvert Cliffs. Now, one of them was part of that team providing inside information. It wasn't a terrorist attack. It was a giant false flag with a specific intent designed to kill thousands of people. One that I broke up got credit for it. But they called it a terrorist thing and shut me up. So I go way, way back, before you even thought January 6th. You changed the way things were done in JSOC. You thought you could do it again in the DIA. All along, you thought you knew better than everyone else, even those above you. So, you decided to continue. And using a combination of twisted and manipulated facts and intelligence, and even a little racism against the first black president and against Muslims, outright hatred against Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State at the time, and you twisted all that up under some warped banner and called it patriotism. You recruited a lot of people. You recruited senior officers, other officers, civilians, and they followed you. You got to the DIA, you tried again, but it didn't work. They caught on quick. You didn't make it very long. And then you were given a second chance. Well, too many things were in motion at that time. President Obama, but you hated so much, Hillary Clinton, they were out of the picture. Things were already going. So you decided to use it for your own benefit. You retired by then. Might as well use what you built. Problem is, you used it against the country. You wanted to take control. Just like you and your countless minions have been doing lately. Your press arm came out just weeks ago and announced your intention to run for president. That didn't go over too well, did it? No. Now, nobody mentions it anymore. You hope everybody forgets. And to cover it up, because you know what rolls downhill, you're trying to come back around and support certain things about President Trump's doing. Try to seem patriotic again when you're the farthest thing from it. Your crimes are known from start to finish. Eventually it will come out. There are people who did nothing but look up to you continuously, and you used it, you abused it, and you trapped people with their own patriotism, their own trust. Used your position, used everything around you. They are complaining now. Many of the people who are smaller have gone silent just to see where the wind blows, hoping they don't go to prison for your actions of what you started. But they're involved in January 6th, where a person was killed, set up to die so you could control the situation. You have others, professionals, online, offline, reporters, things like that, who were involved, who covered, who spread the story, who supported you. And they're mad now. They're coming out. Just like the officers before. Because those officers and the people in the intelligence community knew what you were doing, tried to stop you then. And in 2016, when Obama and Hillary and all the rest of them that you hated so much were no longer in power, and you started using everything against you, they started speaking out in a specific way against you to foil your plans. This is all out there. It's all there. And I'll tell people some things they don't know. Everybody's heard it. Russian collusion. Yes, it happened. Was there a link on a server to a bank in Russia, Alpha Bank? Yes. In case anybody missed it, yes, there was. But President Trump had nothing to do with it. President Trump had absolutely no knowledge of it. But did it exist? Yes. Because you and Lightning Rod and your little group set it up. It was real. And you documented it and took it to the Democrat side, and they thought, hey, we got something on a candidate. Of course they're going to keep it quiet. They're going to run with it. Little did they know that by the time you'd already given it to them, you'd already taken it down, shut it down, erased all the tracks. So they took the information to them. This is golden. Take it to the FBI. You think it's that easy to convince them? They ran it through their system. It was real. They verified it. They didn't know it had already been gone. Of course it was real. You set it up, it was real. And they ran with it, starting Russian collusion. Now your little partner, Lightning Rod, when controlling the whole Russian investigation, kept you out of it. He's no longer around. Starting way back when, Hammer, Pegasus, everything, spying on everyone, spying on candidates, spying on judges, spying on reporters, all a part of it. I spoke out about you and your connection to Lightning Rod in 2015 and was stomped for it because you couldn't even be questioned then, but everybody knows what you're like now. Period. The reason I'm talking about it now is because your sycophants are continuing to attack people, continuing to attack good people, and to dilute what's going on. You throw a little bit of truth out there and it confuses everyone. You're continuing to attack people. It's got to stop. There's an election coming and we need to get this country back on track. Period. Everybody sees how bad it is. You don't care. You're keeping it going for your own personal gain. There are too many good people out there who don't quite know what's going on because you and your group are spreading disinformation, which you've done all along. Wanted to run for president, that didn't work. Now you switched tactics. Haven't mentioned that in a while, have you? No. The attacks and everything have to stop. So I am calling you out right now. No more hiding behind your little minions, your press arm, nothing. I am calling you out into the dusty street right now, you and I. We can meet at a location and be deposed under oath. I will ask you questions, you will ask me questions. I give you my word, I will not take the fifth across the board. This has to stop. I will do this for the good of the people and for the good of my country. Let's see if you'll show up. Or are you going to continue to have your minions attack me and others and everyone else? Once this comes out, if we show over his deposition, let's do it. I don't care if it takes days. I've got the questions. I've got the witnesses. All those people you suckered in using their own patriotism and loyalty against them, against the country, they're going to come out of the woodwork. All the people that are facing charges, that committed crimes under your orders, under your guidance, they're not going to back you up. And once the Democrat side finds out that they were actually right, that the information they were running with and they were promoting and everything like that actually existed, and it's because of you and Lightning Rod, the media ran with that story forever. Okay, you think all those people were stupid? No. They looked at the facts and said, there's something there. Is there a penalty for producing false documents to the FBI? Is there a penalty for producing false intelligence to Congress and the Senate? Wasting millions upon millions of dollars of the taxpayers' money? Affecting elections because of your lies, your fabrications? I'm betting that there is some penalties beyond the treason and sedition. So let's do that transcript. Let's be deposed. I'm not pleading the fifth. We're getting it all out there for the benefit of the people and the country. Your move.
All right, everybody. Whew. Okay, so just want to remind you tonight, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, we're going to be running the Allie Carter video from last night. If you haven't heard her, she came out a couple of times before with all different kinds of information, but bless her heart, she and her mother are on the run. And, she was talking about Diddy, Obama, Michelle Obama, many people years ago, about 4 years ago. So she has really been through hell and back, and so has her mother. And she's come out with a new 20-something minute long video. And so we're going to be playing that tonight, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, everywhere that you get the Michelle Moore Show. So we hope that you are able to tune in and see that if you haven't seen it. All right, we'll see you right here next time on the Michelle Moore Show.
Are you tired of all the pills in your medicine cabinet? I'm Linda Bamber Olson, the creator of the Wave Watch, a more natural approach with 1,000 frequencies for mind and body. People have used the Wave Watch for kidney stones, arteries, blood, immune system, vagus nerve, myocarditis, allergies, colds and flu, ADD and ADHD, strokes, Parkinson's, carpal tunnel, thyroid, Lyme disease, and so much more. Wave Watch has a 1-year manufacturer's warranty for defects and flaws, and you can also upgrade to an additional warranty for water damage and breakage. Are you tired of all your pills and endless trips to the pharmacy? Why not try the Wave Watch with 1,000 different self-care ideas and put your mind at ease?
Just go to wavewatch.com. At checkout, use the code Michelle100 to receive $100 savings on your purchase.
I'm Dr. Fulgens. For over 30 years, UCB has helped customers strengthen portfolios with gold. But let them tell you in their own words.
Buying gold and silver from Universal Coin and Bullion has been one of the greatest experiences for me, and it's been an easy process and also a very safe process to do that.
Call now to secure your 1-ounce gold or silver American Eagle coin with no dealer markup.
Did you know your cell phone emits radiation that has been linked to increased risk of certain types of cancers? This is why manufacturers include hidden warnings to keep your phone away from your body. And what's worse is that children are more susceptible to the potentially damaging effects. Safe Sleep for cell phones is a case specifically designed to block radiation. Its shielding technology integrated into the case has been tested in a third-party FCC-accredited lab to block over 99% of RF and 92% of ELF radiation emitted by your phone. It also functions as a stand for watching videos and comes in a magnetically detachable style for some devices. Safe Sleeve also offers anti-radiation cases for tablets and laptops and has free shipping in the U.S. plus discounted worldwide shipping is available. Go to truthtalkamerica.com today and click on the Safe Sleep banner on the home page. Use the discount code FIRST10 at checkout for 10% off your first order.
For Michelle's social media links, go to MichelleMooreShow.com.